What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Monday, March 3rd edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. 7-game NBA slate tonight. A lot of moving parts, as you would expect, and as is definitely going to be the case this time of year. Once you get into March, April basketball, you get some really messy slates, even compared to what we've been dealing with all season long. But going to talk through game by game. One thing at the top to remind you, I am looking at this through the lens of, if the slate started right now, what would my player exposures look like? And they're always going to change, but there's a couple spots already that are showing up as things that are going to change, or at least assumptions I'm making that are affecting my player exposures. You can see on the screen that I have a lot of Paul Reed right now. That is just a function of me projecting Isaiah Stewart out, even though he's only questionable. I'm not necessarily recommending that you do that, but I wanted to make sure that I have spots open later to swap if he does get ruled out. So that's the approach that I'd be taking right now. But obviously, at the start of the slate, if you do that, you're going to end up getting a lot of the guy that is projected for very low ownership, and then he'll end up being more popular later. The other thing is you can see getting a ton of Bryce Sensabaugh. I think he's perfectly fine if he starts at 4,800, but it looks like just kind of a bad ownership projection on him right now, which, is going to happen when you're using ownership from 4:30 p.m. There is obviously, it's up in the air who even starts for Utah. That changes pretty frequently. But if he is starting and 3% owned, you would want a lot of him, but one of those two things isn't going to be true. He's either not going to start or he's not going to be 3% owned. So that's something that is going to kind of screw up my player exposures right now as well. But just keep in mind, take all of this player exposure wise with a grain of salt. It's more important to just talk through each game, see what looks like a priority, what doesn't, and if there's spots that are popular that for some reason I disagree with, I'll be sure to talk through those as well. If you have questions, throw them in chat. Also, as a reminder, you can get access to my projections using the link in the description below. 3-day free trial with that. Gets you access to a spreadsheet that updates as I update my stuff. Also gets you Discord access, so check that out. Now, starting with Golden State taking on Charlotte. In Charlotte, Golden State, a relatively big favorite here, especially for a road team. Jimmy Butler did go through shoot-around. He is probable. Jonathan Kuminga is the only guy out for Golden State today. 12.5-point favorites at the moment. So not seeing any real priorities here for Golden State. It is a good spot for them. I certainly think they're a team that if you get to any of their main pieces, it is perfectly fine, given that it is a good spot. They do have like a 120 team total, but they are the first game of the night. There are a lot of Q tags, a lot of moving parts. I want to maintain as much flexibility as I can to be able to late swap later. So, clearly goes without saying that if you're getting some Steph, getting some Jimmy Butler, those guys are fine. If you want to use some Podziemski or Moody as, value plays, I think that's perfectly fine, but nothing that looks like a priority for me or the field. Draymond, I'm not getting, but, again, same bucket as the rest of these guys. Secondary plays for any of the starters, I think, on Golden State. I don't think I would want to go any deeper than that. If you did, it would probably be like Buddy Hield or something, hoping he gets hot. But this doesn't strike me as the type of slate where I need to chase a Buddy Hield, 90th percentile shooting game or anything like that. So no priorities for me from Golden State, but I do think any of the starters are viable. On the Charlotte side, nothing really showing up either. Yusuf Nurkic getting 3% ownership. I'm getting 5%. I assume he's just the backup center here behind Mark Williams. I projected this center rotation to be Mark Williams as the starter and playing, reasonable minutes. I think I have him at like 28. Yusuf Nurkic as the backup, and then Diabate basically playing garbage time minutes plus maybe a rotation. So we only have a couple of games where Nurkic has been in and Williams has started. So it's still kind of up in the air exactly how the rotations will go, but that's my expectation here. It makes it so nothing really looks good. You have LaMelo active. You have Bridges active, so you aren't getting bumps to any of the other main pieces. Don't really have interest in Charlotte whatsoever. J3 said, are you upset that the O's let Tony Taters go? No. I mean, it sucks that he's gone. Like, I like him as a player. Seems like a good guy, all of that. But I thought it was the right decision. I didn't think they would bring him back. I didn't really want them to bring him back. At cost. Obviously, I would have loved him to come back at like Tyler O'Neal's cost. But I think they replaced his production with Tyler O'Neill, essentially. And especially if you consider the potential platoon with Kerstad, O'Neill, I think they replaced his production for less salary and most importantly, less years. So from a wanting the best for the team standpoint, no, not upset. From being a fan of him, yeah. Moving on to Portland at Philadelphia. Clean injury report here for the Blazers as far as Q tags go. No Jeremy Grant, no DeAndre Ayton, no Robert Williams, and then no Thibault, no Minaya. Those guys don't matter. Thibault's been out the entire season. So we are running back what we had yesterday for Portland. And one thing I will highlight immediately is that Donovan Clingan played 11 minutes yesterday. That is because he fouled out in 11 minutes. You can completely throw that away as far as what your expectations are for Donovan Clingan's playing time, outside of the fact that, yeah, if he picks up 6 fouls, he's not going to play that much. He's, somebody that on average is going to give you 25 and a half minutes in these games without Ayton and without Robert Williams. That being said, he's still not a priority on this slate because you do have a really big priority later in Joval with Sabonis out. Also, this is a spot too where, like, if I were not going to project Isaiah Stewart out, projecting Isaiah Stewart out obviously makes Paul Reed look better at 3K flat. It also makes Jalen Duren look better. So I haven't looked for sure, but I am probably over the field on Jalen Duren. If you're somebody that is not projecting it that way, I do think Donovan Clingan is a spot where maybe you look to get a little bit over the field to be contrarian in larger field tournaments, given that he does have, 26, 27, 28 minute upside here. And we've just seen a lot of volatility from him at 5,700 and low ownership. That is the type of play that I like to make in large field tournaments. But because I am prioritizing these later centers, it becomes difficult for me to do. Avdia getting 19% ownership, Sharp getting 14%. I'm right around the field on both of those guys. I think the price tags look reasonable. Emwald said, what's your thought on Denny's minutes after playing 42 in overtime last night? Feel like they played him like 24 in a similar situation in recent memory. I projected him normally. I do think that there is the potential for Portland maybe to go a little bit deeper in their rotation, but I went 34 and a half minutes. Like, his playing time is very volatile. He is live to play 40 minutes in regulation, and they do kind of jerk his playing time around some, but usually when you get those 24-minute games, it's more so when all their active guys are healthy. Portland has a tendency when they're missing a main piece, like they are with Jeremy Grant, obviously also missing Ayton, but that's of less importance because you can kind of isolate the center minutes to Clingan and Jabari Walker, and if they're in foul trouble, then Duop Reith. But with Jeremy Grant out, not only does that take out the ability, or not all of the ability, but it lowers the chances of playing a lot of small lineups. But when you take Grant out, when you take out Simons, when you take out Kamara, the tendency for Chauncey Billups has been to give more minutes to his main guys as opposed to going really deep in his bench. I did still project like 17 minutes to Banton, 16 minutes to Chris Murray, in part because this is the back-to-back, and they played so much yesterday. But I still, end up with a 34 and a half minute projection on Avdia, 34 and a half on Sharp, Scoot getting 26 and a half minutes, Simons getting 34. I'm not getting to either of the two guards, but I think that they're both, perfectly fine as secondary plays. To me, the priorities here are Avdia and Sharp, just given their positional eligibility. Small forward, power forward for Avdia, shooting guard, small forward for Sharp makes them look really good. Toumani Camara also is probably going to lead the team in minutes. You've gotten 4 games this year where he's played without Jeremy Grant and without DeAndre Ayton. He's played really big minutes in all of those games. I projected him for like 37 minutes here. The problem is that he's $6,100 and he's still not that good of a point per minute guy, but I do think he's going to play a lot of minutes here. He's been playing well lately also. So do want to mention that. I do expect him to lead the team in minutes more often than not, but Avdia and Sharp looking like the guys I'll be getting to the most. On the Philadelphia side, big injury news that we are waiting on here. Fortunately, this is one of the first games of the slate, but Q-tag on Paul George, Q-tag on Kelly Oubre, and we've seen Paul George playing huge minutes lately, played another, I think, 38 and a half minutes in their last game. You've been seeing like 20 20-minute halves basically out of him lately. So if he's in, he's probably playing a lot and he looks pretty good. I'm getting 17%, Fields at 17%. But if he's out, that's opening up a lot of minutes. And then the same thing for Kelly Oubre. He played 41 minutes last game. If Oubre and George are both out, you're really opening up like 70 to 80 minutes that need to be picked up by Quentin Grimes, Justin Edwards, probably Ricky Council to some extent, Lonnie Walker to some extent. Yabusele probably starts getting minutes alongside Drummond, and then you get Bona in the rotation. So really, really big impact, obviously, with Paul George and Kelly Oubre. But right now with them projected in, I'm right around the field on them. I am a bit over the field on 9K Tyrese Maxey. Just very, he's kind of tough to project in the sense that in blowouts, obviously, he's going to miss very low. He's going to give you like 30 minutes or whatever. But in competitive games, you're just still looking at 40 plus minutes on average in the games that he's played with Paul George and without Joel Embiid this year. He's averaging around 39 minutes per game. I have him in for 38 and a half minutes here, 39-minute median, 38 and a half minute mean as far as his playing time without Embiid and with George this year. So to me at 9K, he still does look very good here. This game does have a relatively tight spread as well. Quentin Grimes should play a lot. Stephen Leibowitz said, when you get to Philly, are you getting to any Drummond? Yeah, I mean, he's getting 7% ownership. I have 7%. 5K is a nice price tag for him. With Yabusele active, there is plenty of risk that you get a repeat of what happened last game where Drummond and Yabusele combined for 48 minutes, but Yabusele played 28 of them. Yabusele closed. That was a matchup against Golden State, though, smaller team. Now you do have, the way I'm projecting it at least, 25, 26 minutes going to Donovan Clingan. I think, getting around 24 from Drummond, 24 from Yabusele is a reasonable projection here. And 24 minutes of Drummond at 5K and low ownership is going to make him viable. Again, he is somebody I would probably like more if you didn't have Joval in one of the later games, if you didn't, in my case, have Duren and Reed looking interesting at center. We also do need to see the starting lineup here. Like if Yabusele starts over Drummond, I'm not interested in Drummond anymore. But also if George and Oubre are out, Drummond's minutes projection does come up because you're going to have to allocate some of those Yabusele minutes or a lot of the Yabusele minutes to soaking up the Paul George, Kelly Oubre minutes. And so that leads you to playing more minutes alongside Drummond as opposed to just playing minutes in place of Drummond. So that is a spot where you'll want to make sure that Drummond is projecting higher if George/Oubre are out. So right now, Philly looks like a pretty solid team to get to. And again, they're going to look like a much bigger priority if you start missing George and or Oubre. Washington taking on Miami. In Miami, about an 8.5 point dog here. No priorities from Washington. Jordan Poole is out, but pricing and the players themselves still aren't great. Justin Champagnie getting 10% ownership right now. I'm at 9%. He's 3,600. This is somebody that will go away pretty quickly as players start getting ruled out, but he is likely to give you around 20 minutes. And with the way the slate's projected right now with these Q-tag guys in, he is just kind of showing up. But this is also an example of why I don't mind just kind of rolling the dice on in the case of Isaiah Stewart, projecting him out. I've been going back and forth with it on Houston too. I saw Emwald mention it. A report came out that Rockets called up 5 G leaguers, so could see their main guy sitting. That's kind of been I think Houston's going to sit guys today. It just seems like too much of a coincidence that like every viable player on their team is questionable against OKC. It seems like they're going to just duck this matchup and not give OKC film basically, but I haven't, and maybe I'll change my mind between now and lock. I haven't projected it that way yet, mostly because then there just end up being so many moving parts. Like I don't know how to project it. I guess the counter argument to that is I kind of just weigh this in my head is I'm still going to end up late swapping, but it'll at least give me openings. Like if I project Şengün, Eason, Thompson out, basically it's just going to give me a bunch of Houston and then I can sort that out later. But my the point that I was making here is somebody like Champagnie at 7:30, you do only have a half-hour gap between this game and Houston. Hopefully we'll get some Houston news before the Washington game tips off. But like if you have 10% Champagnie and Houston rests all of their starters, you're going to be really pissed off because you have 10% of your lineups that have a $3,600 Champagnie when it could be a Houston guy. It could be Reed Shepherd, it could be Jeff Green, it could be whatever ends up looking good from Houston. So that's the point I was making is, I don't mind in some of these spots just taking a chance on guys being ruled out and it helping to avoid the early slate guys. It's why I kind of penalize their projection as well, just so I have maximum flexibility later. But anyway, with the way things look right now, 3,600 for Champagny, probably just a little bit underpriced. Same goes for Keyshawn George at 5,200, Sar at 5,300, starting getting 11% ownership. I probably would have a little bit more of him if it weren't for the Detroit centers. I think all of these Washington guys kind of just look like perfectly fine secondary plays, but nothing that is a true priority. And I do think that this is a team that will look relatively worse as guys get ruled out. So keep that in mind as well. On the other side for Miami, Q tags here. Davion Mitchell, midday downgrade. I did not project him out, mostly because I have no idea what that lineup ends up looking like. Spoelstra's been all over the place with who he is and isn't playing. You also have a Q tag on Andrew Wiggins. My guess at the starting lineup for right now is Hero, Mitchell, Wiggins, Highsmith, Adebayo. Kel'el Ware is out. Highsmith could be Robinson. It could be Burks. It could be Anderson. It could be Larson. I mean, it could be really anybody. But Highsmith has been in Spoelstra's good graces lately as far as playing time goes. So that's where I went. It's not like he's getting a lot of lineups for me anyway. Wiggins, secondary option if he's in. If he is out and you get Burks back in the starting lineup, you do have a $3,300 price tag on Burks. He would once again project as a good value tonight. His playing time last night, he ended up kind of getting there with the help of overtime. But his playing time last night, was a reminder that there is a ton of volatility in Miami's wing minutes here. We've seen Spoelstra just kind of changing it up, using different lineups, trying to find a look that he likes. He pretty clearly seems to already be out on Kyle Anderson. He gave him that one game where he got closing minutes. He played big minutes and was like, oh, okay, so Anderson's that guy. And then, yesterday plays like 6 minutes, even in a game where he could have played a lot more. So it kind of seems like they're out on Anderson, back in on Highsmith lately. Robinson's been getting minutes, but, again, you're going to project Burks if he's in the starting lineup to be a good value. Just keep in mind that there is always the potential with Spoelstra that, it's still 16, 18 minutes, but there is also the upside where it's 26, 28. If Mitchell is out, maybe you get enough Terry Rozier to start to matter. Burks probably, plays more. Rozier salary down to 4,300. So, if you were to get like Wiggins out and Mitchell out, Rozier maybe starts to be interesting. But again, he's pretty clearly not in Spoelstra's good graces right now either. He's been bad pretty much all season long. Adebayo does look like a priority, and this is, obviously with Wiggins projected in, but 31% Adebayo with power forward eligibility, which is the big piece here because there is so much opportunity cost at center tonight. The power forward eligibility looks very, very good. Know Ware should increase rebounding upside for Bam Adebayo. We know Ware has been doing a very good job on the boards. So rebound upside increases for Adebayo here. Playing time looks very good. Power forward eligibility looks good. Matchup is certainly great other than, the threat of blowout. Tyler Hero, perfectly fine as well. 15% projected ownership. I'm getting to 10%. Solid matchup here against Washington. One thing I will mention with the Wizards, and it's probably just a fluke, but I had mentioned it on Twitter the other day. In the month of February, they actually saw a pretty big drop off in pace and bump in defensive efficiency. Not that they were good at defense. They just weren't like the second worst team in the league, middle of the pack in pace over that time. So maybe you do see them slow it down a little bit. You do have Marcus Smart now. You do have Chris Middleton. So that is something where I think Washington is still an above average matchup, but maybe not the best matchup in the league like they were for the first part of the year. So something to keep in mind. Atlanta taking on Memphis in Memphis. No Q tags of relevance for Atlanta, but we do have George Niang out. That does add some volatility to the rotation here for guys like Karis LeVert, Reece. We don't know exactly what this is going to look like. I projected Garrison Matthews to play like 12, 13 minutes. I projected Barlow to be in the rotation. But there is some chance that Atlanta just condenses the rotation and you get 30 minutes from LeVert and 30 plus from Reece and 28 from Terrence Mann, something like that. Again, that's not how I projected it, but it is possible. Daniels maybe plays more. Again, didn't project it that way, but it could happen. Either way, I'm getting to a lot of Reece here at $4,500. I do think that Niang being out helps to solidify his playing time at least a little bit. It's one less guy that can close over him. Terrence Mann could still close over him. LeVert could certainly still close over him, but it is one less guy. And also it just, opens up more minutes even outside of the closing lineup. So I like Reece Shea here at 4,500. Rostering him never feels great. He's not a good point per minute guy, but I do like the minutes for him here. And this should be a high scoring game. Trae Young looks very good here. Fast-paced Memphis team, solid enough Memphis team defensively, but all on a per possession basis. But you're just getting so many possessions here. I like Trae Young. Okongwu looks like a priority at center, even on a slate where center is stacked. $6,100, just too cheap for the playing time we've been seeing from him. Played 34 minutes last game, even with Capella in. Have him projected for 30 here. I like getting to him. I think Daniels looks good at 6,800. I think LeVert looks good at 5,100. I'm not getting too much Terrence Mann at 4K, but I wouldn't have any issue with it if I did. Point guard and small forward looks pretty good. And again, you've seen more playing time from him in general lately. I have him in for about 26 minutes. Not a great point per minute guy, but he is probably a little bit underpriced. So I think Atlanta looks like a priority pretty much throughout their lineup here. The only starter I'm not getting to in pretty healthy amounts is Mo Gay, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory, just not playing enough minutes. Although he is somebody too where, I projected like 8 to 10 minutes to Barlow. Maybe it's 20 minutes to Mo Gay instead of, 15 to Gay and minutes to Barlow. But again, I don't think you're going to need to get there on this slate. Josh Gillum said Kelly Oubre out. So yeah, touched on that with Philadelphia, but that's going to open up minutes for Justin Edwards. It's going to make Max Christie's minutes or Quentin Grimes minutes look even better. I've been flipping those two in my head for like a week now. Going to make his minutes look even better. If Paul George plays, then you're probably looking at even more minutes for George. Lonnie Walker's minutes look better, although I doubt he matters for DFS. So from a DFS standpoint, I would think that you're looking at Yabusele being better, Grimes being better, George getting a little bit of a bump, Edwards getting a bump. Still will be interested to see what the starting lineup is. My guess is that you either get Justin Edwards or Yabusele replacing Oubre. If it's Yabusele, that means Andre Drummond's minutes go up and that Bona is getting backup center minutes. If it's Justin Edwards, Yabusele's minutes probably still go up as far as he probably plays a few minutes alongside either Bona or Drummond, but they wouldn't go up as much as if he does get the start. If George is out, then I assume you're getting a starting lineup probably. If George is out of Maxey, Grimes, Edwards, Yabusele, and Drummond would be my guess. Maybe they spot start Lonnie Walker. They could go that route, but we'll see. Moving on to the Memphis side here, where Ja Morant is questionable for the Grizzlies. Santi Aldama is also questionable. Morant obviously matters, but Aldama matters a lot and probably, more than you're thinking because he's a bench guy. If he doesn't play, Jaren Jackson's minutes projection goes up quite a bit. Zach Edey also probably plays a bit more if Aldama is out. So both of those guys would look a little bit better. If Morant is out, obviously you're opening things up for Scottie Pippen, maybe for Luke Kennard, depending on what they go with starting lineup-wise. But that's, the more obvious one for sure. Jaren Jackson, I'm getting to anyway at 8K, and I will be getting to him more if Aldama is out. Desmond Bane, I'm right around the field at 17%. He's 7,600. I'm a little bit over the field on Ja at 8,300. No issues with that. Clearly going to be happy getting to any of Jaren Jackson, Desmond Bane, Ja Morant in a game where the Grizzlies have like a 130-point team total. That's obviously where a lot of their offensive production is coming from. Vince Williams, 4,100. Sure, if he ends up in a lineup, but probably won't. Same for Brandon Clark. These are guys that probably fall off the minute that I just update for Kelly Oubre being out, much less whatever random shit we end up with from Houston at the same start time. So happy to get to the main pieces from Memphis. I think they look very good. I'm happy to be getting there. Houston, touched on it already. Be ready to late swap this team. I have no idea who's playing today. My guess would be that the Q-Tag guys sit. It just seems like that spot where they kind of just duck OKC, but we will see. Right now, with the Q-Tag guys projected in, the only piece that I'm getting to is Tari Eason, and I think the field just the industry has him projected wrong, at least to some extent. My assumption here is that he would be starting. So in this situation, which is probably not going to be the real situation, my guess at the starting lineup was Thompson, Green, Brooks, Eason, Şengün, with Jabari Smith coming off the bench, but still playing like 30 minutes. That's what we've seen in this situation previously. And it gives you like a 29, 30-minute projection on Tari Eason. He played 32 minutes last time against Milwaukee. That was a game where Amen Thompson got ejected. So don't know if Eason would have actually been in the closing lineup or not. He may have subbed out for Şengün. Instead, it was Thompson that subbed out for Şengün. 2 games ago, in this situation, you only got 27 minutes for Eason, but that was foul trouble. He subbed back in, was going to play low to mid 30s, immediately picked up foul 5 or 6, whatever it was, and then didn't come back. I think it was his 5th. So I do expect, 29, 30 minutes from Eason if he is in and if he is starting. Again, both of those are very big ifs here, but I don't really know why the industry is projecting him to play 25 or 26 minutes. So that is a spot where I'm getting a bit more than the field, showing up around 16% of the time. Nothing else a priority for me. Nothing else a priority for the field. Cam said 3K Cam Whitmore day. Yeah, if guys are out, sure. If Thompson is out, if Eason is out, if Şengün is out, you're just going to open up a ton of stuff here. The starting lineup obviously will matter. If Şengün is out and you're getting a Steven Adams start at 3,800, that is a reasonable value piece. I'd expect low 20s in minutes from him. Adams himself is questionable, so it could turn into a Landale start where he is 3K flat, and then suddenly my Paul Reed doesn't matter. But this is actually one reason why I did make that decision on projecting Stewart out and getting Reed in a bunch of lineup spots. It's going to hold open the ability for me to swap for what Houston does, whatever ends up happening in Detroit, whatever lineup Utah ends up going with. So that's why I made that decision there, as opposed to like with the Houston guys and with like Miami with Davion Mitchell. These games are early enough in the night that I'm going to just be able to late swap and get to what I want to get to. But holding open this spot in the last game of the night was really important for me because it's going to ensure that I have maximum flexibility throughout the slate. So that's another reason I made that decision. If the Pistons were playing at like 7:30 or 8, I probably would just have played it straight. And when they ruled out Isaiah Stewart, I would have late swapped. Power said, do you think they go Drummond, Yabu double big with Oubre out? They could. The starting lineup will tell you a lot. Like if Yabu starts, then yes, obviously they're doing it. If Yabu comes off the bench, I think you're getting. So like right now, I have 48 minutes combined projected to Drummond and Yabu with Oubre in, since I haven't redone projections. If Yabu comes off the bench, I probably end up at like 52 to 54 minutes combined between Drummond and Yabu, and then Bona in the rotation. If Yabu's starting, then I probably end up with something where it's like, 27, 28 minutes to Drummond, 16 to Bona, 18 to Bona, like 4 at center to Yabu, and then Yabu just playing a bunch of minutes alongside them. So it really depends on what the starting lineup ends up looking like for me. It's not a matchup against Portland, obviously, where it's super conducive to going with the two bigs. Like you have a small 1 through 4 and then Klingon, basically. So a lot's going to depend on the starting lineup as far as exactly how I project the Drummond Yabu minutes for Philadelphia. So Houston, again, just be ready for shit to hit the fan here, and like Jayshawn Tate and Cam Whitmore and Landale or Adams to end up looking like good value. But with the Q tags projected in, the only piece that I actually really like here is Tari Eason. Also, I guess worth touching on that if you do get the Q tag guys ruled out for Houston, Jabari Smith would move into the starting lineup, I assume, and look very good at 5,100. And then you would get what I think is the most difficult spot to project in DFS. Jalen Green, 7,300 in a god-awful matchup with no teammates. He'll get all the usage he could possibly want. And OKC will have nothing else to focus on to take away other than Jalen Green. So you get a situation where his efficiency is likely to drop off. His opportunities are likely to increase, or at least the ball will be in his hands more. OKC could just double him and trap him, and his usage doesn't even really increase. But it's a really tough spot where like the ceiling becomes sky high because Jalen Green theoretically can go get whatever shot he wants if all of these guys are out. The floor remains pretty low because he could just shoot 1 for 20, or OKC again could just force the ball out of his hands. They have the defenders to make life miserable. So you do have the potential for the very, very difficult Jalen Green spot where I would kind of just want to do whatever the opposite of the field is. If the field is just like, oh, Jalen Green by himself, he's going to be 40% owned. just throwing a number out there, at 7,300, I'll find some other guys to play and hope he just doesn't make shots. If the field is like, oh, shitty matchup and, OKC is a 15-point favorite and nobody's going to play Jalen Green, then yeah, I'll take some shots on the guy with a 50-plus fantasy point ceiling because all of his teammates are out. So really, really tough spot there where generally I like to just do the opposite of the field. On the OKC side here, good, Houston team defensively if their guys are in. If they're out, obviously it becomes a better matchup, but you also get more blowout risk. Right now, I am getting to some Shea right around the field at 8%. He's 10,600. There are bigger priorities for me on the slate, but it is SGA. Kaysen Wallace, Chet Holmgren in small amounts, I think look fine. No priorities for the field, no priorities for me. Jalen Williams getting 2% ownership at 8,100. If you get there, fine, but keep in mind Chet is back in the lineup, so you do have another, good offensive option in there as well. Sacramento taking on Dallas. The most popular player on the slate, at least right now, will be Jonas Valanciunas. He is projected for 79% ownership. I don't know if it actually gets that high in large field, especially because on DraftKings, it's the $5 with 71,000 people. Probably ends up being like 60, 65%, something like that. But no Domas. So you should get a Joval start here. And one thing I will point out immediately with Joval is if you just look at Joval starts for the year, it's going to mislead you because he played on a Washington team that was blown out so often. His median minutes in games he started this year is like 23. His mean is like 25. I expect more than that for Sacramento. This is obviously a competent NBA team. This game has a 2 or 3 point spread. I have Joval in for 28.5 minutes. The only thing that is mildly concerning about this matchup to me is that Dallas, their only centers are Dwight Powell and Kai Jones. So there is, some risk that Dallas just runs a small lineup here and maybe Sacramento matches by going with more Trey Lyles. But then the counterpoint to that is, or they could just leave Joval on the floor and Joval can get 20 rebounds and score 20 points. So I'm not, going too crazy docking Joval's minutes projection here. I do expect 48 minutes to be split between Joval and Lyles. Again, maybe they go small. Like you could, I guess, argue that it's not 48 minutes and that maybe Joval plays like 26, Lyles plays like, 20, and you get a couple minutes of a lineup that has like Keegan Murray at the 5. I guess that's possible here. But, again, I think in general, expecting somewhere around 28 minutes from Joval looks good. And at 5,400, if you projected 25 or 26, he would still look really good. He's a great point per minute guy. So along with everyone else, I'm happy to get to Joval here. I like DeRozan at 7,400. I think you could see his playing time trend up a little bit with Sabonis out. I don't expect it to be too much of a difference. He did play 40 minutes last game, but you already didn't have basically Trey Lyles in the rotation. So I think you still basically have isolated center minutes where Lyles is just stepping in to backup center. And then DeRozan's probably playing similar minutes, but he could play at least a little bit more. Same goes for Levine. Same goes for Murray. I do wish I was getting a little bit more Murray. I'm around the field on Levine. I'm around on DeRozan. I'm there on Monk. I'm there on Ellis. Keegan's the only guy I'm not really getting to. I do wish I had a little bit more just because, again, there is some case where like you're getting Keegan Murray center minutes, but I don't think they'll go that route. PNG pointed out that you actually got Joval and Sabonis minutes together last time against Dallas. Yeah, that's a really good point where like you're not obviously you're not expecting it today because Sabonis isn't playing. You're not, even if Sabonis were in, you wouldn't be expecting that here, but it's a really good reminder that like the whole, going big to match or going small to match, teams don't always do that. There are pros and cons to playing big against a small team or playing small against a big team or whatever. It's not as simple as just, Sacramento's going to have to match Dallas. If Dallas wants to play a bunch of minutes where like they're using Omax and Kessler Edwards and shit like that, Sacramento very well could just say like, okay, have fun. I don't care. Joval's going to go nuts. And really, like Dallas would have to be knocking down threes for Sacramento to even start to care at all, most likely. It's not as simple as just like, oh, Dallas is checking in small guys. Let's take out our big guys. Dallas has to actually make Sacramento pay for being big. And Dallas really probably doesn't even have the personnel to do that unless they get lucky. So it's, a good reminder that it's not as simple as just, completely matching size for size. If there's no like punishment or no threat of punishment to having your bigs out there, you can just go get every rebound and dominate the paint and that's probably what we'll see here from Sacramento. So another really good point in favor of Jovel. The rest of the Sacramento guys, I think, look fine. Again, I kind of wish I was getting a little bit more Keegan, but any of the starters plus any of the other starters look like secondary plays. Keon Ellis at 4,300 is probably playing upper 20s in minutes. He's not a great point per minute guy, especially when he's playing with all of the other main pieces here, but still fine is like a last guy in. On the Dallas side, I do not know what the starting lineup is going to be here. There is the potential that we get even more center value. Another reason, is he not on the slate? I was going to say another reason that I wouldn't mind holding a spot for Reed, but Kai Jones is not in the player pool, so never mind. We won't be getting more center value. I don't know who's going to start at center. They could go Dwight Powell. They could go Kai Jones. I projected them to go back to Kessler Edwards, and then you to basically just have a really ugly three-man center rotation with Kai Jones, Dwight Powell, and Kessler Edwards. For anyone that missed it, Moses Brown no longer with the Mavs. His second 10-day ran out. Kai Jones is now on a 10-day. So I assume Kai Jones is in the Moses Brown role, but I don't know if he's starting. Like, he has no familiarity with this team, obviously. If Kai Jones starts, though, I assume he's just playing enough minutes to cut into other guys. But again, he's not in the player pool, so it doesn't really matter. One thing that I will mention is that Jason Kidd did mention wanting to, kind of limit the number of games that Kessler Edwards is playing in. So if Kessler Edwards doesn't start today, I would guess that he's not playing and that you're getting more more Prosper, more Jaden Hardy, stuff like that. If they were to start Kai Jones and Kessler Edwards doesn't start, obviously if Edwards does start, he is playing, but that is something to keep in mind just when you're trying to project the rest of Dallas. Also, Dallas has just been running really deep, like 10, 11-man rotations. They played 11 guys in the first half and the second half each last game. So I am erring on the side of not giving a lot of minutes to these fringe guys. Obviously, Kyrie plays a lot. You expect Max Christie to play a lot. You expect upper 20s from Clay. You expect, if Najee Marshall starts, him to play around 30. But as far as these other guys, I'm trying to be really cautious with their minutes. And I'm getting to the four guys that I would expect to get to here. No problems with any of them. No true priorities. Marshall's getting 27% ownership at 5,400. I'm not there. I think he's fine, but I think there's just other guys, other value pieces I'm getting to. This probably does also have to do with the way I projected Detroit. Like, if I'm just getting a bunch of Paul Reed and Jalen Duren, I have less need for Najee Marshall, but Houston will end up cutting into that ownership probably anyway if they rule guys out. But he is a solid point per dollar value. You can see here I have him projected for 29 points at 5,400. No problems with getting him. It's just an ownership thing, and then the way that I'm projecting Detroit. Obviously, my Detroit exposures here are going to be very, very strange. But Malik Beasley, I do think is a priority. He's 5K flat, shooting guard, small forward. Very good matchup for his skill set against Utah. And then you don't have Tobias Harris today, in addition to Stewart being questionable. So I expect Beasley to be in the starting lineup. I expect him to play a lot. I think he looks very, very good. He's in almost every lineup that I have right now. Obviously, some of that will get swapped around to Houston and, other value pieces as it opens up. Some of the Philadelphia guys probably, but I expect to have a lot of Malik Beasley one way or the other. Paul Reed, 5% ownership was me kind of just trying to give him some sort of real number. The later that Stewart were to get ruled out, obviously the lower Reed's ownership will be. But I got to 40% of him with him projected for 5% ownership. Really what that tells me is that if you had perfect information at the start of the slate, the true the efficient ownership for Paul Reed's probably somewhere around 20%. So projecting him at 5, it's basically saying, yeah, you shouldn't have him in every lineup, but 5's way too low. You should have a lot of him. What it's basically telling me is that Paul Reed's a solid value if Stewart is out. How much you would actually want depends, one, on your strategy as far as whether, how heavily you're trying to exploit the field versus play close to optimal amounts of players, and then also exactly how high his ownership ends up coming in. Jalen Duren, same thing. Efficient ownership, probably 15 to 20% if you know that Stewart's out. But with him projected at 10%, I'm getting 30%. You expect more playing time from Duren. Obviously, foul trouble is going to be a risk with or without Stewart. But we have had 5 games where Stewart's been out this year. Duren's median playing time was 30 minutes per game. His mean was in that range as well. And Reed is not the same of the same importance as far as taking minutes that Stewart is. So that's why you expect Duran's minutes to go up. You expect the same rotation where it's Duran plus a backup playing 48 minutes, but Duran gets a little bit bigger priority when it's not Stewart than when it is Stewart. So that's why you expect more minutes there. So I like Stewart a lot. Also, not going up against a high usage big or good guards really for Utah. So that helps as well. Cunningham getting 25% ownership at 10,100. Happy to get to whatever I can get to there. I do wish I had some more Asar Thompson. Probably will once I finish with late swapping and everything. But no Tobias Harris does open up the potential 4 more minutes for him. We've seen his playing time ramping up anyway. I went 25.5 minutes. I think I might end up getting a little bit higher. But I do expect somewhere in that 26-minute range for Thompson with the ability to play maybe 28, 29. So I do think he's a solid value at 5,300. If you want to mix in some Tim Hardaway or Dennis Schroeder, I think it's fine. But to me, Beasley, the clear priority. The centers, if you are on the same page as me, look very good. Cunningham, obviously great if you can find the salary. And then I think Asar Thompson's a good play. I just don't have him for whatever reason. And then on the other side with Utah, again, this is probably one reason I don't have much Thompson or Najee Marshall too, is what I mentioned at the top of the show. I projected Bryce Sensabaugh to start, play 26.5 minutes. Ownership is not, I guess, projecting him to start because if he starts, he's not 3% owned. One of these two things is not going to be true. Obviously, we will get more information later on, but Bryce Sensabaugh is a solid point per dollar value. I don't think he's some amazing priority. I think he's just another good value play where he's similar to Najee Marshall. He's similar to Asar Thompson. The difference here is just that Marshall and Thompson are getting their correct ownership when I ran stuff, and Sensabaugh's not. Keontae George at 6,700. Walker Kessler, both of these guys look fine. We know the upside that Keontae George is giving you. We know the upside that Kessler gives you. It is a tough rebounding matchup for him, though, obviously going up against Jalen Duren. So ultimately, I think kind of secondary plays here with Sensabaugh, George, Kessler. A little bit of Isaiah Collier is fine as well. So that's all I have for you on this one. Don't forget to check out my projections using the link in the description below. 3-day free trial on that also gets you Discord access. And for the record, I pay basically no attention to who is in the Discord. So if you end up deciding you don't want or need the projections, cancel your free trial, want to hang out in Discord, you're not getting kicked out. I don't really care. So just throwing that out there as well. Link for that is in the description below. Otherwise, keep an eye on news. There is going to be a lot of late swapping today. Thanks for checking out the show, and good luck on your lineups.